The stars had no memory. They burned the same way they always did, cold and distant, caring nothing for the small creatures that lived and died beneath their light. But humans remembered. Humans always remembered. Admiral Tae-Soo stood alone on the observation deck of the Eternal Han, his hands clasped behind his back. Through the massive window, he could see the fleet stretching out into the darkness. 12,000 warships hung in perfect formation, their hulls black as the void around them. Each ship carried thousands of soldiers, engineers, scientists, and families. Behind the warships floated the station worlds, massive structures that had been home to humanity for longer than anyone could truly understand. 47,000 years. That was how long his people had wandered in the space between galaxies. That was how long they had waited. The door behind him slid open, and he heard soft footsteps approaching. He did not turn around. He already knew who it was. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Yuna. Her voice was calm and professional, but Tae-Soo had served with her long enough to hear the tension underneath. "The reconnaissance team has returned. I have their report." "Show me," Tae-Soo said. Yuna touched a panel on the wall, and the window transformed into a display screen. Images appeared, one after another. Cities of glass and light, ships moving through busy trade routes, planets covered in buildings and farms and factories, and everywhere, the symbol of the Velan Dominion. A circle with 3 lines cutting through it. "They still exist," Yuna said. 800 species under their control. Over 2,000 inhabited worlds. Their military is large, but they have not fought a real war in 30,000 years. They have grown comfortable. Tae-Soo studied the images in silence. The Velans looked the same as the old records showed them. Tall and thin, with gray skin, and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. They moved with the easy confidence of creatures who had never known fear. "And Earth?" he asked quietly. Yuna's expression tightened. She changed the display. Now it showed a monument. A tall pillar of white stone standing in the center of a grand plaza. Around the pillar, Velans walked and talked and laughed, paying it little attention. At the base of the monument, words were carved in the Velan language. The inscription reads, "Here we remember the cleansing of the Terran threat. May their extinction serve as warning to all who would challenge the Dominion." Tae-Soo read the words 3 times. His face showed nothing, but inside his chest, something cold and hard pressed against his heart. "They built a monument," he said. "They celebrate it." "Yes, Admiral." "Do they remember why they did it? Do they remember what we were?" Yuna shook her head. "The records from that time are mostly lost or sealed. To most Velans today, humans are just a story. A primitive species that tried to resist the Dominion and was destroyed. Nothing more." Tae-Soo finally turned away from the display. He looked at Yuna, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that made her step back. It was not anger. It was something deeper than anger. It was the weight of 47,000 years of exile, compressed into a single look. "My grandmother told me a story," Tae-Soo said. Her grandmother told it to her, and so on, back through 2,000 generations. When the Velans came to destroy Earth, they gave no warning. They did not declare war. They did not make demands. They simply arrived and began burning. The attack lasted 6 hours. 6 hours to kill 8 billion people. 6 hours to erase everything we had built. And when it was done, they recorded it as a minor administrative action and forgot about us. He walked to the center of the observation deck, his boots clicking against the metal floor. But we did not forget. The seed ships escaped. 3 million survivors, scattered across 100 vessels, running into the void between galaxies where no one would follow. And for 47,000 years, we have prepared. We have grown. We have built. We have trained our children and our children's children, all for this moment." He turned back to face Yuna. "How many humans exist now?" "Current census shows 12 trillion across all station worlds and fleet vessels. 12 trillion. From 3 million survivors to 12 trillion souls, all carrying the same memory. The same purpose. The same burning need that had been passed down through countless generations. Send word to all ship commanders," Tae-Soo said. Full fleet assembly in 6 hours. We move at dawn. Yuna hesitated. Admiral, some of the council members are asking for more time. They want to study the Dominion further, find weaknesses, plan more carefully. We have planned for 47,000 years. There is no more careful. There is no more time. Tesu's voice was quiet but absolute. Every day we wait is another day that monument stands. Every day we wait is another day they teach their children that we were vermin to be exterminated. No more waiting. We go now. Yuna saluted and left to carry out his orders. Alone again, Tesu returned to the window. The display had faded, and once again he could see the fleet and the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, past the edge of the galaxy, was a point in space where Earth had once existed. There was nothing there now. No debris, no dust, no trace. The Velans had been thorough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a stone, smooth and gray, no larger than his thumb. According to his family records, this stone had been picked up from a riverbed in a place called Korea, on a continent called Asia, on a planet called Earth. It had been passed down through his family for 47,000 years, carried from ship to ship, from generation to generation. Never lost, never forgotten. He held the stone tightly in his hand. We're coming home, he whispered to the darkness. Not to the place. The place is gone. But to the ones who took it from us. We're coming, and we will make them remember. We will make them understand. You cannot kill a people by destroying their world. You only make them stronger. You only make them patient. You only give them forever to prepare. He put the stone back in his pocket and straightened his uniform. In 6 hours, the fleet would begin its journey. In 6 hours, 47,000 years of silence would end. The stars had no memory. But humans remembered everything, and now, at last, it was time for the galaxy to remember them. The first warning came from a small border station at the edge of Velan space. A young communications officer named Trelvor was working the night shift when his instruments detected something strange. Ships were appearing at the far reaches of his sensors, more ships than he had ever seen in one place. He tried to send a message to the central command. He managed to say 12 words before his station went dark forever. Those 12 words were, "Unknown fleet detected. Thousands of vessels. They are not responding to hails." By the time anyone thought to investigate, the border station was gone. Not destroyed. Just gone. As if it had never existed at all. Captain Dongha watched the station vanish from his command ship's display. His face showed no emotion. This was the 17th Velan outpost they had eliminated in the past 3 days. Each one fell the same way, quickly and quietly, leaving no survivors to report what had happened. "Status of the next target?" he asked. His first officer, a woman named Mira, checked her console. "Relay Station 7. Crew of 40. Light defensive weapons only. They have not detected us. Move us into position. Standard approach." The human ships did not fly like other vessels in the galaxy. They did not use the common faster-than-light drives that the Velans had spread to all their subject races. Instead, they used something different, something they had developed during their long exile. The ships seemed to fold space around themselves, appearing and disappearing without warning, without trace. The Velans had never seen anything like it. They had no defense against enemies who could strike from nowhere and vanish before anyone could respond. While Captain Dongha led the vanguard through Velan territory, another mission was taking place deeper inside the Dominion. Intelligence Officer Hana walked through the streets of a Velan archive world, her true form hidden behind holographic technology. To anyone who looked at her, she appeared to be a Velan administrator, tall and gray-skinned, moving with the proper amount of arrogance. The archive world was called Velkorath, and it held the oldest records of the Dominion. Millions of years of history, stored in crystal databases that stretched for kilometers beneath the planet's surface. Somewhere in those records was the truth about Earth's destruction. Hana had trained her entire life for this mission. She spoke the Velan language without accent. She knew their customs, their body language, their social rules. She had studied them for 200 years, preparing for the day when she would walk among the enemy, She found the entrance to the restricted archives and used a stolen access code to pass through the security barriers. Inside, the corridors were empty. Few Villans came here anymore. The past did not interest them. They were too busy enjoying their power in the present. It took her 6 hours to find what she was looking for. The original orders for the Earth operation, sealed in a security level that no one had accessed in thousands of years. She broke the encryption using tools that human scientists had spent centuries developing, and she began to read. What she found made her stop breathing. The official history said that Earth was destroyed because humans were developing dangerous weapons. The official history said that humanity was a threat to galactic peace. The official history was a lie. The truth was much simpler and much worse. 47,000 years ago, a Villan trade delegation had visited Earth. It was supposed to be a routine first contact, the kind the Dominion had done thousands of times before. The Vellans expected to be treated as superior beings. They expected the primitive humans to bow and scrape and beg for the honor of joining the Dominion. But humans did not bow. They did not scrape. They did not beg. Instead, they smiled. They offered handshakes. They pulled out chairs and invited the Vellans to sit. They treated them as equals, as guests, as potential friends. The Villan delegation was shocked. They had never been treated this way by a younger species. They returned to their ships confused and angry, and they sent a report to their superiors. The report described humans as dangerously disrespectful and lacking proper understanding of the natural order. 3 months later, the Vellan fleet arrived at Earth. Not to conquer, not to negotiate, simply to erase. Hana sat in the dark archive, staring at the records. Her hands were shaking, her eyes were wet. 8 billion people had died because they had refused to kneel. Her ancestors had been burned to ash because they had shown time's dignity asterisk. She copied the files and began making her way back to the extraction point. She had to get this information to Admiral Tesu. He needed to know. Everyone needed to know. The transmission reached the Eternal Han 6 hours later. Tesu read it in his private quarters. Alone. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Then he called a meeting of all ship commanders. "I have received intelligence about the reason for Earth's destruction," he said. His voice was flat and calm, but every officer in the room could feel the cold radiating from him. "We believed it was about resources, or territory, or fear of our potential. We were wrong." He transmitted Hana's findings to every ship. "They killed 8 billion people because our ancestors treated them with respect instead of fear. They erased our world because we smiled at them, because we offered them chairs." He let the silence stretch. "I want you to understand something. This was not war. This was not even conquest. This was murder committed by creatures who could not stand the idea of being treated as equals by those they considered inferior. Our crime was dignity. Our punishment was extinction." He stood up from his command chair. "No more quiet strikes. No more hiding in the shadows. Every ship in this fleet will advance toward the heart of the Dominion. We will show them what happens when you try to destroy a species for having pride. We will show them what 47,000 years of anger looks like." He looked around at his commanders, and what they saw in his eyes made them understand that mercy was no longer part of the plan. "The Vellans forgot us. They built monuments to our death and then stopped thinking about us entirely. They moved on. They grew comfortable. They grew weak." His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "We are about to remind them. We are about to teach them a lesson that the galaxy will never forget. You do not kill a world and walk away. You do not erase a species and sleep peacefully, because somewhere in the darkness, the children of that species are waiting. And they remember everything." The fleet changed course. The full force of humanity began moving toward the center of the Dominion. The age of ghosts was over. Now came the reckoning. High Arbiter Krelvos received the reports in his private chamber, surrounded by the finest luxuries the galaxy could offer. Silk from the weaving worlds, wine from the vineyard planets, art stolen from 100 conquered civilizations. He had earned these comforts through a lifetime of service to the Dominion, and he intended to enjoy them. But the reports kept coming, and they made no sense. 17 border stations destroyed in 3 days, his military advisor said. No distress calls, no wreckage, They simply stop responding. Rebels, Krelvo said, waving a thin gray hand. Some of our subject species getting bold. Send a punishment fleet. We did, High Arbiter. The punishment fleet has also stopped responding. Krelvos paused with his wineglass halfway to his lips. What? 47 warships. Gone. Like they never existed. A cold feeling began to form in Krelvos's stomach. The Dominion had ruled for 100,000 years. No one challenged them. No one dared. The other species of the galaxy had learned long ago that resistance meant extinction. Who was doing this? He demanded. The answer came 3 days later, when refugee ships began arriving from the outer territories. The survivors told impossible stories. Ships that appeared from empty space. Weapons that burned through shields like paper. Soldiers in black armor who moved with perfect coordination and fought with terrifying skill. And they spoke a language that no one had heard in 47,000 years. That is impossible, Krelvo said when he heard the translation. The humans are extinct. We destroyed them ourselves. I have seen the monument. High Arbiter. The evidence is clear. The attackers are human. Then where did they come from? Where have they been hiding? No one had an answer. Krelvos ordered every available fleet to the border regions. He sent his best generals, his most advanced weapons, his most loyal soldiers. He told them to find these impossible humans and destroy them completely. The fleets found the humans. Or rather, the humans found them. The Battle of the Korath Nebula lasted 4 hours. The Velans outnumbered the human force 3-1. They had heavier ships, bigger guns, more experience in conventional warfare. None of it mattered. The human ships did not fight like any enemy the Velans had ever faced. They did not form battle lines or trade volleys of fire. They appeared inside Velan formations, struck at weak points with surgical precision, and vanished before anyone could respond. Their weapons seemed to know exactly where Velan shields were weakest. Their tactics seemed to predict every Velan move before it was made. In 4 hours, the entire Velan fleet was destroyed. Not a single human ship was lost. News of the defeat spread through the Dominion like wildfire. For the first time in living memory, the Velans knew fear. While the main fleet advanced toward the Dominion's core worlds, smaller human task forces spread out through Velan territory on different missions. One of these task forces was led by a young pilot named Subin. Barely 200 years old and fighting in her first real campaign, Subin flew a small strike craft, fast and deadly, designed for precision attacks on enemy installations. But today her mission was different. Today she was hunting a slave transport. The Velans had built their empire on slavery. 800 species served them, doing the work that Velans considered beneath their dignity. Mining, farming, building, fighting, dying. The subject races had no rights, no freedom, no hope. They existed only to serve. Subin's squadron found the transport near a mining colony. It was a massive vessel, ugly and functional, carrying 4,000 captured workers from a species called the Orath. They were being shipped to a factory world where they would work until they died. All wings, attack pattern 7. Subin ordered. Disable their engines first. Then communications. We need to take them intact. Her squadron moved like a single creature, striking the transport's key systems with perfect accuracy. Within minutes, the huge ship was drifting helplessly, unable to move or call for help. Subin docked her craft with the transport and led her team inside. They moved through the corridors quickly, neutralizing the Velan guards before they could react. The guards had never fought humans before. They had only heard stories. The stories did not prepare them for the reality. The cargo holds were packed with Orath prisoners. They were small creatures with large eyes and gray-green skin, huddled together in fear. When the doors opened and they saw human soldiers in black armor, they pressed back against the walls, expecting death. Subin removed her helmet so they could see her face. She was young, with dark hair cut short and eyes that held no hatred, only determination. "You are free," she said. Her words translated through a device on her collar. "We are not going to hurt you. We are here to break your chains." The Orath stared at her in confusion. One of them, an elder with gray streaks on his skin, stepped forward. You are the ones from the old stories, he said. The humans. The Velans told us. You were monsters. They said you would eat us alive. Subin almost smiled. We are not monsters. We are just people who remember what it feels like to have everything taken away. We will not let that happen to anyone else. She reached into a pouch on her belt and pulled out a small pendant. Inside was a crystal containing a tiny amount of soil. Earth soil. Passed down through her family for 47,000 years. This is all that remains of our home world, she said. The Velans destroyed it long ago. We have wandered the darkness between galaxies ever since. We know what it means to lose everything, and we have returned to make sure no one else suffers the way we did. The elder looked at the pendant, then at Subin's face. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and touched her hand. Thank you, he whispered. Word of the rescue spread faster than the fleet could travel. The subject races of the Dominion had lived in fear for so long that they had forgotten how to hope, but now hope was returning. Carried by impossible warriors from beyond the galaxy's edge, the humans were not just fighting the Velans, they were freeing everyone the Velans had enslaved. They were breaking the chains that had held the galaxy prisoner for 100,000 years, and with each world liberated, with each species freed, more voices joined the chorus. The ghosts of Earth had returned. The Dominion was falling, and for the first time in longer than anyone could remember, the galaxy began to believe that change was possible. High Arbiter Krelvos watched the reports pile up on his desk. System after system falling. Fleet after fleet destroyed. Subject races rising up against their masters. The empire he had served his entire life was crumbling around him, and he did not know how to stop it. He looked up at the portrait of himself that hung on his wall. It had been painted when he was young and powerful, and certain of his place in the universe. Now he was none of those things. Now he was just an old man watching the end of everything he had ever known. The humans were coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. Velan Prime was the jewel of the Dominion. For 100,000 years, it had been the center of power, the throne from which the Velans ruled over 800 subject species. Its cities were magnificent, built from crystal and light, stretching across the surface of a world that had never known war. 40 billion Velans lived there, safe and comfortable, confident that their supremacy would last forever. They were wrong. Admiral Tesu stood on the bridge of the Eternal Han as his fleet emerged from fold space above Velan Prime. 12,000 warships arranged themselves in a sphere around the planet, blocking every escape route. Behind them came the station worlds, massive structures carrying trillions of humans who had waited 47,000 years for this moment. Open all channels, Tesu said. I want every being on that planet to hear this. His communications officer touched her console. Channels open, Admiral. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Tesu stepped forward and began to speak. His voice carried to every ship in his fleet, to every station world, to every city on Velan Prime, to every corner of the Dominion that could receive a signal. 47,000 years ago, you murdered our world. You came without warning. You killed 8 billion people. You erased everything we had built, everything we had loved, everything we were. And when it was done, you built monuments to celebrate what you had done. You taught your children that we were vermin. You forgot about us entirely. He paused, letting the words settle. We did not forget. We could not forget. For 47,000 years, we have wandered the darkness between galaxies. We have grown. We have prepared. We have kept the memory of Earth alive in our hearts, passing it from parent to child across 2,000 generations. And now we have returned. The Velan defense fleet was forming up between the planet and the human armada. Thousands of ships, the largest military force the Dominion had ever assembled. It was an impressive display. It was also meaningless. We are not here to negotiate, Tesu continued. We are not here to make demands. We are here to show you what it means to face a species with nothing left to lose. You took our home. You took our past. The only thing we have left is our future. And we will build it on the ashes of your arrogance. The Velan fleet attacked. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Velans threw everything they had at the human ships. Their grand warships, ancient and powerful. Their orbital defense platforms, bristling with weapons. Their doomsday devices, held in reserve for emergencies that had never come in 100,000 years of dominance. The humans broke them all. It was not even close. The Velans had spent 100,000 years conquering species that could not fight back. They had forgotten how to face a real enemy. Their tactics were outdated, their technology stagnant, their soldiers soft from generations without challenge. The humans had spent 47,000 years doing nothing but prepare. Every weapon, every ship, every strategy had been designed with one goal in mind: the destruction of the Velan Dominion. They had studied every war the Velans had ever fought. They knew every weakness, every flaw, every blind spot. When the last Velan warship fell silent, the space above Velan Prime was filled with wreckage. The orbital platforms were burning debris. The defense grid was gone. The planet lay open and helpless before the human fleet. Admiral Tesu looked down at the world that had ordered Earth's destruction. 40 billion Velans were looking up at the sky, waiting to die. They knew they deserved it. They had seen what their ancestors had done. They understood now what the old monument really meant. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "all weapons are charged. We can begin orbital bombardment on your command." Tesu said nothing. He stared at the planet for a long time. Chief Strategist Ara stepped forward. She was old, her hair white, her face lined with years of service. Her family traced directly back to a city called Seoul, on a peninsula called Korea, on a planet called Earth. She had lost everything. She had every reason to want vengeance. "Admiral," she said quietly, "the fleet is waiting." "I know," Tesu replied. "This is what we came for. This is what we have prepared for across 47,000 years. The Velans murdered our world. They deserve the same fate." "Yes," Tesu said. "They do." He turned to face her. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something she had never seen before. Not anger, not hatred, something deeper, something that looked almost like peace. "Walk with me," he said. They went to the observation deck, where the massive window showed Velan Prime in all its terrified glory. Cities were dark. Traffic had stopped. 40 billion beings were holding their breath, waiting to see if the next moment would be their last. "They killed us because we were young," Tesu said. "Because we were small. Because we refused to bow. They looked at us and saw something that threatened their idea of how the universe should work. So they erased us." He placed his hand on the window. "If we burn their world, we become what they were. We become the species that destroys others because they are different, because they are threatening, because they refuse to bow." He shook his head. "Our ancestors did not survive 47,000 years of darkness so that we could become monsters." "Then what did they survive for?" Ara asked. "What is the point of all this if not revenge? Justice?" Tesu said. "Not the same thing. Revenge means we destroy them because they destroyed us. Justice means we show the galaxy a better way." He turned back to the window. "The Velans will lose their empire. Every species they enslaved will go free. Their military will be dismantled. Their archives will be opened. Every crime they committed across 100,000 years will be exposed for all to see. They will live with the knowledge of what they were, and what they did, and what it cost them. They will remember, forever, that they tried to erase us from existence, and failed." He looked at Ara. "That is worse than death. Death is an ending. What we are giving them is a beginning, a chance to become something better. And if they refuse, if they try to rebuild their empire of cruelty, we will be watching. We will always be watching." Ara was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You are wiser than I am, Admiral." "No," Tesu said. "I am just tired. Tired of hate. Tired of carrying 47,000 years of anger. I want to put it down. I want to build something instead of destroying something. Our ancestors gave us their pain. I want to give our children something better." He returned to the bridge and opened communications again. "People of Velan Prime," he said, "we will not destroy your world. We are not like you. But your empire is over. Your slaves are free. Your fleet is gone. You will surrender your military, your weapons, your monuments to conquest. You will open your archives and reveal every crime you have committed. And you will live with the truth of what you were." He paused. "This is mercy. Not because you deserve it, but because we refuse to become what you made us hate. Remember this day. Remember that humanity returned not as destroyers, but as proof that there is another way. Learn from it, or spend eternity wishing you had. He cut the transmission. Below him, Velan Prime began to accept the terms of surrender. The empire that had ruled for 100,000 years was ending, and humanity, the species they had tried so hard to erase, was writing the final chapter. 1 year passed. The galaxy changed more in those 12 months than it had in the previous 100,000 years. The Velan Dominion was gone. Not destroyed, but dissolved, broken apart into 1,000 pieces that would never fit back together. The Velans still existed, but they were no longer masters of anything. They lived on their worlds, watched by human observers, struggling to understand how to exist without power over others. The 800 species they had enslaved were free. Some were angry and wanted revenge. Some were confused and did not know what to do with their freedom. Some were grateful beyond words. All of them were learning, slowly, what it meant to control their own futures. Humanity did not claim the empty throne. They had no interest in ruling the galaxy. They had spent 47,000 years dreaming of home, not of empire. But they helped. Human engineers traveled to broken worlds and rebuilt what the Velans had destroyed. Human doctors brought medicine to species that had been dying of neglected diseases. Human teachers opened schools and shared knowledge that had been hoarded across millennia of exile. The freed species formed a loose coalition, a gathering of equals that met to discuss problems and find solutions together. They called it the New Assembly, and they built its headquarters on a neutral world far from Velan space. Humans were invited to join, but they refused any leadership role. "We did not free you so we could rule you," Admiral Dewan said at the first assembly meeting. He was Tesu's successor, a young man with serious eyes and a gentle voice. "We freed you because it was right. What you do with your freedom is your choice." Admiral Tesu had retired after the war. He was old, even by human standards, and he had carried the burden of command for too long. He spent his final years on a quiet station world, tending a small garden and teaching young children about Earth. But there was one last task he needed to complete. For 47,000 years, no human had known exactly where Earth had been. The Velans had classified the coordinates, hiding the location of their crime. But Hana, the intelligence officer who had discovered the truth about Earth's destruction, had never stopped searching. She spent years digging through Velan archives, following traces and hints, until finally she found what she was looking for. The coordinates were transmitted to every human vessel in the galaxy. On the anniversary of the war's end, the entire fleet gathered at a point in space that looked like any other point in space. There was nothing there. No planet, no debris, no sign that anything had ever existed in this location. The Velans had been thorough when they destroyed Earth. They had left nothing behind. 12,000 warships and hundreds of station worlds formed a vast circle around the empty coordinates. Trillions of humans stood at windows and observation decks, looking out at nothing. Many of them were crying. Some were praying in languages that had not been spoken on Earth for 47,000 years but had been preserved through all the long exile. Admiral Dewan's voice came through every speaker on every ship. "We have come home," he said. "Not to a place, because the place is gone, but to a memory, to a truth. This is where we came from. This is what was taken from us. And this is what we have carried with us across 47,000 years and countless generations." He paused, and in the silence, the fleet began to play music. Ancient songs, preserved in recordings and memory, passed down through families who refused to forget. There were songs in Korean, in English, in Spanish, in Mandarin, in 100 other languages. There were songs that children had sung in schoolyards and songs that soldiers had sung in wars long before the Velans came. There were songs of love and loss and hope and defiance. The music played for hours. People wept openly. They held each other. They whispered the names of ancestors they had never known but had always honored. Then Hana stepped forward to speak. She was old now, her hair white, her face lined with years. But her voice was strong. "We were born in the fire of a dying world," she said. "We grew strong in the darkness between stars. We returned not as conquerors, but as proof that you cannot destroy a people by killing their planet. We carried Earth with us, in our bones, in our blood, in our stubborn refusal to disappear. She looked out at the empty space where Earth had once orbited its sun. Earth is gone. Nothing we do can bring it back. But Earth was never just a place. It was an idea. It was a dream. It was the belief that every person matters, that every life has value. That dignity is not something that can be taken away by force. Her voice grew stronger. The Velans tried to kill that idea. They failed. Because ideas cannot be destroyed by bombs or weapons or hate. Ideas survive in the people who carry them. And we carried Earth's idea across 47,000 years of darkness. And we brought it back to a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant. She raised her hand toward the empty coordinates. This is not an ending. This is a beginning. We have mourned long enough. We have prepared long enough. Now it is time to build. Time to create. Time to show the galaxy what humanity can do when we are not just fighting to survive, but living to thrive. The fleet began to disperse. Some ships carried colonists to new worlds that humans had chosen as their future homes. For the first time in 47,000 years, humans would walk on planets under open skies. They would breathe fresh air and feel natural sunlight on their faces. They would build cities and farms and families in places they could call their own. Other ships joined the reconstruction effort, helping the freed species build their new future. The galaxy had been broken by the Dominion, and it would take generations to heal. But humans knew something about healing. They had been broken too, and they had found a way to become whole again. A few ships turned toward the unknown. Humanity had spent so long preparing for war that they had forgotten how to explore. But the universe was vast, and there was so much they had never seen. Young pilots like Su Bin volunteered for these missions, eager to discover what lay beyond the edges of the maps. Su Bin stood on the bridge of her exploration vessel as it prepared to leave known space. She held her pendant, the one with Earth soil inside, and she thought about her ancestors who had fled the burning world 47,000 years ago. They had been afraid and desperate and alone. But they had survived. They had kept the faith. They had passed down the memory and the hope and the promise that someday their children would return. They would be proud, she said quietly. All of them. Everyone who kept us alive. Everyone who refused to let us forget. She put the pendant back around her neck and gave the order to begin the journey. Behind her, the empty space where Earth had been grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among billions. But it would never be forgotten. Humanity would carry it with them wherever they went, across all the ages to come. They had lost their home. They had found their way back. And now, at last, they were ready to build something new. Not revenge. Not empire. Just a future. A future worthy of everyone who had suffered to make it possible. The stars were waiting. And for the first time in 47,000 years, humanity was ready to meet them, not as refugees, not as warriors, but as explorers. The long silence was over. The long journey was just beginning, and this time, nothing would stop them.